Good morning, my dear pupils. How are you today? So, we go ahead with Unit 7, Renaissance and Reformation. Next. We continue with the Renaissance art, and today we're going to focus on the Quattrocento paintings. Next. But first, you have to remember the characteristics, the general characteristics that serve for all the art in the modern ages, for all the Renaissance art expressions. Yes? So you remember here the beauty, the seek of beauty, ideal beauty based in mathematical proportions, the golden ratio, the human proportions, anthropocentrism. You remember the human beings are the center, the most important, because of our capacity to think in a reasonable way, to think in a scientific way. And of course, I guess you remember that every art in the Renaissance, in the modern ages, is taken as a basis, as a model, the ancient Roman and Greek standards or models. Okay? You remember it. That's only a review. Then, next. We go ahead with the characteristics of the Quattrocento paintings. Quattrocento, remember, 1400, 15th century. Yes, that's not the 14th century, but the 15th century. And I guess you remember that the most important city in the Quattrocento was Florence, yes, with the Medici family. Yes, good. So, about the paintings. Paintings, paintings is always in trying to represent the reality, the three-dimensional reality in a flat surface. Yes, that's a painting. Anyway, so the artists in the Quattrocento, they're going to try to create the volume of the figures and also try to represent the space, the deepness of the spaces they represent, and to represent the space, the deep space, they are going to use the linear perspective, that is, the use of geometry and mathematics to create a sensation of deepness in these flat surfaces, trying to represent the space. Yes? So, based in the study of the mathematics, based in the study of the proportions, and of course, based in the study of the human body. In the third characteristic, you see exaltation of beauty and proportionality. Beauty is a mathematical measure. It's a mathematical representation of the human body. The relationship between the parts and the parts with the whole. You remember all these figures we studied about the canon? Yes, that is, we're going to continue seeing these. Remember that I also told you that the artists are going to dissect corpses to study in a scientific way where are the intersections of the bones, the muscles, where are the muscles located. So they try to represent the human body, not trying to figure out how they could be represented. No, in a perfect proportion and a copy, and where they try to represent the body as it really is in the reality. So naturalism, yes, they try to imitate how the human body looks like in reality by a scientific way, by the study of the mathematical proportions and by a deep study about the human body anatomy. Yes? And about the themes they are going to represent. Of course, they are going to continue representing religious themes, like the Virgin with Jesus baby, like all the histories explained in the Bible. But you remember, in the Renaissance, the artists imitate, or they are based in the ideas of the ancient Rome and the ancient Greek. And for the Greeks and for the Romans, the mythology was very important. So we're going to see here, in the Renaissance, in the modern ages, that the artists represent again the ancient mythology. Yes, and of course, they are also going to represent the bourgeoisie. Remember, the Medici, they were bankers. So, and all the bourgeoisie want to be their faces in pictures. Yes. Well, next. Here we see an example, a very nice example from the painter Paolo Uccello. Yes. Here we see the interest or how important the mathematical proportions were for the artist. Remember, artists were no more artisans. They study mathematics, geometry, anatomy. They also study literature, mythology. Yes, and that's what we are going to see reflected in their art pieces. So, here you see how important for Paolo Uccello was trying to represent the deepness in the picture. You see the diagonal lines in the floor and in the ceiling. That point, if you continue with these diagonals, they led our view to the central part. Yes, trying to represent the deepness in the picture, in the picture, trying to represent, thanks to this grid floor or checked floor, they try to represent the deepness, yes, in a flat surface. That's very important. That's the use of the linear perspective and mathematical perspective. That's not based in intuition. That's based in a geometrical study, in the study of the mathematics and the proportions. Next. Here we see it better. Okay. Yes. So the study of the perspective, and all the sizes match, and they are perfect from the mathematical point of view. We're going to see a lot how the artists in the Renaissance, they love to represent these squares in the floor, this checked floor, or floor with the made in grid. Yes. Next. Well, here we find Masaccio, the Holy Trinity. Well, this is here the artist tries to create, in Italian we name it, in French we name it trempe l'huile, trap or a trick for the eyes, trampantojo, una trampa para el ojo, a trick for the eyes, yes, trempe l'huile. So he tries to represent in a flat surface. This picture is a flat surface, is created in a wall. You will see this later, the wall where it's painted. So we see here, closer to us, he represents in the lower part a grab. Then over we see two people sitting, people praying, and then behind them there's Jesus Christ in the cross, yes, with okay, and then behind there's the Father God. And if we see in the ceiling, in this varel covered vault, Yes, you have seen the columns, the classic columns, yes, the classic elements, but now we focus in the sailing, in the covert vault. The lines create this linear perspective, trying to suggest the idea of deepness, to create a very deep painting with different spaces one behind the other. They try to represent the space, a deep space in a flat surface. And they manage to do this thanks to the mathematics, thanks to the linear perspective that I guess you studied this in visual arts, yes? Yes, for sure. And also thanks to the shadows. Yes, the shadows create also the volume shadows made with different colors. Very similar but different colors create the volume and create the space. The figures, you also see the bodies are very realistic, naturalistic, yes? And they create, here Masaccio creates the space in a flat surface, a three-dimensional representation. Next. Okay, here you see with these green lines the linear perspective that makes our eyes follow the lines with the idea of a deeper space, but in reality it's only a very flat surface. Next. Here you see the charge in this wall in the left side, in the side aisle of this Gothic cathedral, you see the Holy Trinity. That's a flat painting in the wall, yes? But when we look at this, there's a trampoline, there's a trick for our eyes, and we can imagine, or it looks like as if it were a chapel in the side aisle. Yes, but it's only a flat surface. Next. That's what the artist tries to represent in different, here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different spaces, trying to represent a chapel, but it doesn't exist. It's only a flat surface, suggested by the use of a perspective, a mathematical or linear perspective. Next. Here you see how the artist wants to trick our eyes, trying to represent the three-dimensional sensation, the sensation that there's a background, that there's a chapel in this wall, a chapel that actually does not exist. Yes? Next. Here we see the details of the Virgin and Saint John that are close to the Jesus Christ in the cross. Yes? We see how realistic they are, the proportions, they express feelings, emotions, but their feelings are always in the Renaissance serene emotions, quiet emotions, and we see that these figures they are not flat. Thanks to the use of the shadows, they gain volume and they are quite realistic, even if they are quite damaged because of they were created in the 15th century. Yes, next. Well, then we are going to approach to Botticelli, incredible artist in the Quattrocento in Florence. Sandro Botticelli. Sandro Botticelli, he paints, he's a very delicate painter. He represents he's a master in creating the ladies, the Virgin. He's very delicate. Yes, also the stuffs, the clothes he represented are always like if the wind were blowing and moving the clothes or the stuff, yes. So all the buildings look like very dreamy, as if he were in a very melancholic atmosphere, yes. So he's very, very delicate. And here we see the representation of the Virgin. But he's not only going to represent religious themes, he's also going to represent mythology. Yes, you see the naturalism in the representation of the Virgin, you see the volume, you see the shadows, you see that there's a background representing the nature, and you see also with these lines he tries to represent in some kind of deepness. Yes. Next. Here, wow, the death of Holofernes. Well, that's theme taken by the Bible. But here there's something new. Maybe you can see or you can pay attention to the naked body. How Botticelli is here interested in the perfect representation of the human body, the proportions, the mathematical proportions, the study of the anatomy. Yes, this concept of beauty based in the representation of the perfection, mathematical perfection of the body, by knowing exactly the position of the muscles, the size of the bones, yes, the interest in the representation of the human body. The ancient Rome and Greek sculptures represent the human body. That's the anthropocentrism. These painters, and also we'll see later the sculptors, are interested in representing the human body in its in the best expression of the human body beauty. Yes, in a mathematical expression and also an act beauty. Well, next. This one is very, very famous. You see the birth of Venus. Venus, this is not Eve. This is not a religious theme. That's a mythological theme. You see the birth of Venus. You see the naked representation of the body. You see how interested is Botticelli in the perfect representation of the anatomy. Next, we see this here bigger, a little bit bigger. You see the mythological representation of the winds that are blowing and permitting Venus reach the shore. Yes, and here we see how she's going. She's about being covered. This Botticelli uses always or tries always to represent the wind. He loves to represent the movement of the clothes. Yes, and he also represents here the ideal beauty. I guess if you study in literature the ideal beauty for the modern age poets, they talk about, or they talk about the ladies with a pale face, a pale color, and also blonde hair. He represents the ideal beauty. Okay, next. Here we see the ideal beauty described by the poets. Yes, with the hair in movement, this blonde hair, and also this face where we can see the melancholical expression, the lines, the fine contour lines, creating the draw of the face. Yes, a very serene and quiet beauty. Next. Well, in this one, what do you think? Yes, Botticelli used the same model, the same woman, to represent both the Venus and the Virgin Mary. Well, using the same model was not accepted by everyone. The church, there was a priest that persecuted these designs because you see the Virgin was not supposed to be so beauty. Some men in the Renaissance or the Virgin could inspire men not a religious feeling but a sexual feeling. That's why some priests, especially the monk Savonarola, persecuted Botticelli because he painted the Virgins to beauty. Yes? But you see, he reflects the perfect idea of beauty, the human proportions, these fine grace. Yes? Next. Okay, here we've got Piero della Francesca, the flagellation. Yes? Good for these days in Easter. The flagellation. Which elements we have been studying, or which characteristics that we study for these Quattrocento paintings match to this paint? You see, the interest for the human body, the perfect size or the perfection in the representation of the anatomy, perfection in the anatomy and in the mathematical representation of the human body. Yes. Also, the classical elements, you see there the columns, the classic columns. Yes. You see also the flat ceiling with these squares digged in the ceiling. Yes, covered flat ceiling or flat roof. Yes. And what else? The linear perspective. In the floor, you can see the lines, you can see this grid, you can see the squares, the checked floor that permits us, or imagine that there's deepness in the picture. We see the third dimension, we see how deep this flat picture seems to be. Also, if we compare the size of the people, these three closer to us, and also the smaller size of the group at the bottom in the left side, it's only a matter of size. Smaller, they are supposed to be in the background, yes? So that's the mathematical proportions, what permits us imagine that the picture is very deep, yeah? And also the volume of the figures, they are not flat figures, yes? They are moving with the movement of the knee, and also with the movement of the arm. It seems there's a deepness in the picture. Also the use of the shadows to create the volume, to create the perspective. So a mathematical concept of beauty and a scientific way of representing the space, to represent the deepness in a flat surface. Next. Here again, Piero della Francesca, the ideal city. So, here you see that the same characteristics we study for the architecture in the Quattrocento and Cinquecento, so also for the painters. Yes, painters were also like engineers. They study mathematics, the proportions, geometry, philosophy, architecture, literature. They're very curious. They study everything. And here in this picture, again, the diagonals that lead our eyes to the center of the picture, creating the sense of deepness. This linear perspective, mathematical perspective, and in the center, what's there? A building that is very representative from the Renaissance architecture, a central plan. That's a round plan, the perfect shapes, yes, you remember the circle, and also in the center a dome, the use of the classic columns. Well, everything we have been studying till now. Next. And here we have been seeing that the importance of the religious themes, the mythological themes also, but the portraits were very important in this moment. Yes, I see, or I can imagine you're thinking about this man Federico de Montefeltro nose. Yes, not very perfect nose, but they are the bourgeoisie that wants to be represented. They hire or they pay the most important artist to represent themselves. Yes, and that was the ideal beauty. Maybe you cannot consider the profile of the lady very beauty, but again, the pallid face, the blonde hair, and the representation of the nature in the background. Yes, so this bourgeoisie pays the artists as a symbol of power or as a symbol of richness, as a symbol of their power, because they can afford paying a portrait and they want to see themselves. Yes, so the portraits, mythology, and of course religious themes. But you see the beauty of the Virgin, the ideal beauty serves also to represent the Virgin or Jesus Christ. Yes, they seek for the beauty, and beauty is a mathematical concept. Well, that's all. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope I express myself in a proper way. And, well, next chapter will be the Cinquecento paintings. So have a nice day and see you next day. Bye bye, my dear pupils. Bye.